Welcome back to Human Biology with Dr. B. Today we're talking about the body defenses. So, every day we encounter a lot of invaders, things that make us sick, things that are trying to take over our body, etc. Clearly, my body is not currently winning. However, the goal is for you to learn how yours hopefully will. So, the first thing, the body's Department of Defense, what is it? It's not me, it's you. No, really, it actually is you. It really is all the other things. That's what we're trying to protect against. So, the common targets of the defense system include, number one, pathogens, things that make you sick. These are the things that you think of when you think of sniffly noses, hacking coughs, purulent discharge, etc. If you don't know what purulent is, Google it. Sorry. Okay, so bacteria, viruses, prions, protozoans, fungi and parasitic worms. Ew, sick, gross. Second thing are cancer cells. Yes, your body does protect you against cells that have gone astray, that have gotten a mutation and are replicating out of control. So we have a number of lines of defense in our body. The first one being non-specific. So we have physical, chemical, surface barriers. These are non-specific. They keep basically everything out. The second thing, we have internal chemical and cellular defenses. These are non-specific still, so they attack anything that basically is not you. Anything they encounter that is not you, they'll eat it up. It's great. And then the third is we have our adaptive immune response, which is very, very specific for each type of invader. All three of these we're going to go into in more detail as we move through this lecture. So first, let's talk about some physical barriers. First of all, the skin. I can't tell what she's doing in this picture. It looks like she's scratching. That's what it makes me want to do. We do think of the skin just as normal things, but this is actually what the skin looks like. It's a number of various layers that we have protecting ourselves from the soft tissue and organs and necessities underneath. So you can see here we have the epidermis. The very external portion of the epidermis is keratinized. This is a stratified squamous layer. Very flat cells, and yes, you do flake off skin every day because as the skin reproduces constantly, as the cells reproduce, they get pushed and pushed to the surface, which is what you currently see on the outside of your body. And the proteins in the cells become, I don't want to say pretty much desiccated, so it's keratinized, so it makes you waterproof. You take a shower and you don't swell up like a sponge. No one here is SpongeBob SquarePants, thank the Lord. Also, it is resistance to toxins, enzymes, invaders, etc. The next level that we have are our mucous membranes. Basically everything that is open to the public, I said open to the public, on your body is covered with a mucosal lining. We have the mucosal of the nasal cavity, the mouth, also in the esophageal and the lungs and the bronchi, as well as if we go through the digestive system, goes all the way down. Respiratory digestive tract, within these mucous membranes, they have a layer of mucus that is real sticky that helps track and trap invaders. And then we have chemical barriers. So we usually think of sweat as something nasty, something that smells. It's just a pain. We wear deodorant. We protect against all of the various smells that can occur throughout the day. However, the sweat and the oil glands of the skin actually are very helpful in protecting you. Both the sweat and the oil glands produce what we call the acid mantle, which helps prevent bacteria from attaching and colonizing your skin. As well as the sweating action basically provides this flushing, washing of your skin, even though, yes, you will be taking a shower later because you probably stink. And then we have the lining of the stomach. I need you to be thankful that this is the picture I chose for this because the internet has some amazing pictures of the internal lining of the stomach. This is the least gross of all of them. If you look down here, let me find my cursor. Down here, we call these the gastric pits. And at the bottom of the pits, we produce hydrochloric acid. Not only do we produce hydrochloric acid, you can see a close-up right here, but also a number of digestive enzymes. Not only does this digest the food that you consume, but the acid helps kill off any bacteria that could get into your system. Urine, there it is. Operation Golden Flow, right there. The urine, you might not think of a urine being a protective barrier, but it in fact is. Peeing, and peeing often, is very, very helpful. Your urethra does have a mucosal lining and therefore can be colonized by bacteria. The flushing of the urine, which should occur regularly and often, and should be a light yellow color. If not, you're dehydrated. If it's dark yellow, it flushes out any bacteria. It prevents bacteria from lining the urethra. The urethra is the way that the urine gets from your bladder to the external portion of your body, which we call the toilet. Saliva and tears. I love this picture of Kim. Yes, did you know that crying and drooling does actually help prevent bacterial and viral colonization? In your saliva and tears, you have this wonderful enzyme called lysozyme, which hydrolyzes bacteria very easily. Not all of them, which is why we have multiple other defenses as well. And you can see here on this picture where all of these fit in. We have tears, they wash away. The skin, it has the acid mantle, it sweats, it cleans. The majority of your immune system is actually located right here in your large intestine, not necessarily in your blood as we would think. It's pretty awesome. Well, keep in mind, everything that we eat comes in through our mouth and down here. So your intestines are pretty much the most open to the public thing that we have in our bodies. Saliva, again, washes microbes from your teeth. We have our respiratory tract, our stomach, we have a ton of acid, and our urinary bladder. Gotta pee, y'all. So our second line of defense, we have phagocytes and natural killer cells. Our phagocytes are basically neutrophils, macrophages, and eosinophils. Neutrophils are the first cell to arrive on the scene of any type of invasion. Macrophages come next. These develop from monocytes in response to any type of invader. And then we have eosinophils. Eosinophils attack pathogens that are too large for phagocytosis, primarily parasitic worms, things of that nature. And natural killer cells are pretty much the BAs, the badasses of our immune system. They kill cancer cells. They kill anything that just doesn't say, "Hi, my name is Alyssa Blystone." If it doesn't say that, it eats it. They search out abnormal cells, cancer cells, kill them, digest them whole. With the chemicals, part of our second line of defense, we have three basic ones: interferon, the complement system, and then fever. You might not think fever is chemical, but we'll discuss that. So interferon, these slow viral reproduction. If you look at this figure right here, we can see our viral particle infecting this particular cell. The virus replicates, it produces new virus. Now, this allows for interferon. It attaches here. It basically triggers the production of more interferon, which will then cause this particular cell to prevent viral replication within it. It's really awesome. The complement system, we also call it the MAC defense system, because the complement system, it produces all of these proteins that when they form together will form these amazing pores in the bacteria. Now, in the bacterium, it has a very high hydrostatic pressure inside. So when we make these pores, it allows water in, which causes the bacteria literally to explode from the inside out. And then fever is caused by pyrogens. Now, contrary to popular belief, fever is nothing to be afraid of. Anything under 105 is normal, and pyrogens are these proteins that are produced by inflammation when your body is under attack. And they basically cause your hypothalamus to reset your internal thermostat to a little bit higher. This is normal. The slightly elevated temperature allows slower viral and bacterial growth, so it slows it, number one. Number two, it triggers you to kind of slow down, because then all of a sudden you feel pretty terrible. And when your body is fighting off a massive infection, you really do need lots of fluids, lots of sleep, lots of rest, so that your body can concentrate on killing off all the invaders as opposed to doing extra things, like giving a lecture. Over 105, this is a medical emergency. You should go to your emergency room ASAP. With children, fevers are much different, however. So our second line of defense is inflammation. If you've ever pulled a hangnail, got a cut, sliced your finger open on something ridiculous, you have experienced inflammation. Or if you've had surgery, inflammation. The first thing that we see with inflammation is redness. The mast cells come to the area and release what we call histamine. Histamine is this wonderful protein that it's a chemical mediator that attracts more cells to the area, more white blood cells, so that more white blood cells can help fight off the infection faster. It's right here. The second thing is heat. With the more blood to the area, as we know from our discussion of the blood carries with it the body's temperature. So the more blood in the area, the warmer that particular area is going to be. Not only does the temperature rise help attract more blood to the area, but it also increases cellular respiration, which whenever we have any infection in the area, we need to increase cellular activity so we can kill it off. Then we have swelling. Swelling is a function not only of the redness and heat, the histamine causes the capillaries to become slightly leaky, which is necessary because we want white blood cells to the area. However, not only do the white blood cells come to the area, but oxygen, nutrients come to the area as well. And typically, when we see swelling, it gets a little bit larger. It's warm to the touch. And what comes with that is some pain. The pain is not necessarily caused by attacking the nerves in that particular area, but it can be caused by the increase of fluid in that area. Sometimes some bacteria will produce toxins that will trigger your nociceptors, those are your pain receptors, as well as prostaglandins. Now, prostaglandins increase the inflammatory response in order to help the body fight off infection in this area. Oh, we have a video of it. I will post this online later. The third line of defense is your adaptive immunity, and it is exactly that. It adapts to whatever comes its way and is very important in that. So the first thing we need to talk about is the lymphatic system. You can see this picture right here. So here we have the circulatory system. We have our arteries in red and our venous system in blue. And right along with that, we have the lymphatic system. Now, the arteries take the blood to the tissues. The venous system pulls the blood back from the tissues up to the heart. Now, when the blood is pushed out to the tissues, some of the fluid is pushed into the tissues as well, and then is resorbed by the venous system. However, some of the fluid remains in your tissues, and this is typically some of the white blood cells, etc. As you can see here, arteries come in, we push the blood through the capillary, and then we have the lymphatic capillaries basically fingering through the arterial and venous capillary system. This is to resorb any extra fluid that could be pushed into the tissues at this point. It travels back up very similarly the way that the venous system does via the skeletal muscular pump and through the lymph nodes. The lymph nodes are where we have the highest concentration of B and T cells, which are most important to our adaptive immunity. This is what gives us specificity and memory. Specificity is directed at a specific pathogen. So the specificity of our adaptive immune system attacks one single particular bacterium. The amazing thing about our adaptive immunity is that it does adapt so that it can provide for every single type of invader that we ever encounter. Also, it has a memory. Not a memory like you and I do in our brain, but a memory where it produces plasma cells and antibodies that recognize every specific invader that we ever encounter, which is a lot. So, how do we distinguish what's you and what's me? Well, it's not you, it really is me. And we call this the major histocompatibility complex. Every time I say major histocompatibility complex, I feel like I need to salute. Molecules on every single one of your cell basically hold out its hand and say, "Hi, I'm Alyssa Blystone and you are not. And if you're not me, I'm going to attack you." Every single cell on your body has an MHC1 and 2. MHC1 and 2 help you recognize what belongs in your body and what doesn't belong there. The second thing that we recognize is antigens. Antigens are things that do not belong in your body. These are what your body would recognize as foe, not a friend or foe. These can be anything from the external surface of bacteria to a certain protein on a viral capsid, any basic part of the bacteria, or any part of the invader that is not you is recognized as an antigen. So lymphocytes play a large role in our adaptive immunity. We have both B and T lymphocytes. Now, I want you to notice at this point that these are leukocytes. Leukocytes are white blood cells. It's the overarching name for white blood cells. B and T cells are a branch of those, which we call lymphocytes. These are our adaptive immune cells. B cells are named for where they are formed and produced and mature. And they are formed and produced and mature in the bone marrow, otherwise known as the bursa. T lymphocytes, just like every single blood cell in your body, are formed in the bone marrow, but then they mature in the thymus. The thymus is an endocrine gland that if you were to put your hand over your heart, like you are saying the Pledge of Allegiance, and then move it slightly center, that's where your thymus is. And as an adult, your thymus has decreased in size drastically. However, as children, the thymus is almost the size of a lung. It's huge. Oh my goodness, it's huge. Down here in this picture, I love this picture. You can see antigen presentation. Now, remember we just talked about MHC1 and MHC2. MHC1 says, hi, I'm, insert your name here. MHC2 presents antigen. Now, anytime a cell, a phagocyte, in this instance a dendritic cell, dendritic cells are present in the layers of your skin and help protect you from invaders there, as well as in your gut. Basically, these antigen-presenting cells will eat the bacteria, as you can see here, chomp, 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 chomp. And then parts of the bacteria will be presented, antigen-presenting cells, will be presented on its MHC2 external to the cell. Now this attracts and activates a helper T cell. The helper T cell comes over and says, oh, hey, I see that you're presenting me some antigen. This antigen does not belong here. And the helper T cell, once it recognizes that, becomes activated. And this is what helps produce your immune response. So we have two different types of immune response. We have antibody-mediated immune responses and cell-mediated immune responses. Antibody immune responses is where your B cells recognize the invader and they produce an antibody specific for that invader. Okay, so there are a number of different molecules in this world. We've discussed this in our chemistry chapter. They all have different shapes and sizes. Let's talk about it in something that you and I can actually physically conceptualize of. Think of a key. So there are a number of different locks in this world. We have car locks, we have door locks, all of these. So how do we make a key specific for each and every one? And how do we make them different so that my key doesn't open the door to your house, so that we have some level of protection? The same thing happens here with our B cells. They are basically the locksmith. They produce all of these molecules. You can see them up here. Antibody molecules have the basic shape of a Y. And up here in each of these areas are what we call binding regions. And these binding regions are produced, and each binding region is specific for one type of invader. It's almost like these are the locks. It's almost as if these are the locks and the antigens on the different bacteria are the keys. So each and every one of these is specific for only one. And this is what helps with our immune memory as well, because we can store some of these antibodies for use later, which we'll look at as well. So effector B cells, plasma cells, use these antibodies to neutralize the antigen. Antibodies are these proteins that are produced by these plasma cells, and these antibodies will go out, attach they'll find their key, and they will, multiple of them will attach at one area, and they'll basically say, hey, big plasma cells over here, big phagocytes over here, this guy doesn't belong, I've recognized it doesn't belong, and then the phagocyte will phagocytose it and remove it from the circulation. We also have the cell-mediated immune response, and this is where T cells come in, they're activated, and they will then kill the cells that are recognized as not you. So our adaptive immune response, we have basically 7 steps in our adaptive immune response, the first of which is the threat. So first we have a threat. There it is. We find our antigen. Our antigen is then engulfed by, we have detection. The macrophage detects the foreign organism or molecule and engulfs it. So then we need to alert, which is the third part, we need to alert the other cells. So how does it do this? It does this by antigen presentation. The macrophages basically digest the bacteria inside and then take bits and pieces of that particular invader and put it out on the external part of their cell. Then the helper T cells get activated, as you can see here, which is 4. We start the alarm. The helper T cells activate both B cells, which we just saw on the previous page, that will make antibodies, and memory T cells so that we remember this particular antigen and we don't get sick from it again. Which brings us to number 5. We need to build specific defenses. So once the helper T cell activates the B cells, the B cell will then produce plasma cells as well as memory B cells right here. Plasma cells and memory B cells. The plasma cells are going to make a ton of antibodies. The memory B cells, these go and are stored in your bursa so that they can remember and produce more antibodies on demand. T cells over here, they become 2 different types. They become memory cytotoxic T cells and effector cytotoxic T cells. Memory cytotoxic T cells, these stay in circulation. They go to your lymph nodes and they kind of hang out and wait for you to get invaded by this invader again. Cytotoxic T cells will then, if this is primarily for cancer, will go kill that cancer. And then the last part is we have our defense. Defense, this is our antibody mediated response. The antibodies are secreted by the plasma cells. The plasma cells, these are specific for each of the type of invaders that your body is encountering. An effector cytotoxic T cell over here releases perforins. Perforins do exactly that. They perforate the bacteria or the virus and basically explode it. And then we move into continued surveillance. Never, ever, ever does your body sit back on its haunches, if you will, and say, oh, I'm fine, I'm healthy, I don't need to. These cytotoxic T cells, these helper T cells, don't need to be wandering the body. Once you've encountered a disease, your body, with those plasma B cells, those memory B cells, and those memory cytotoxic T cells, will continue to move through your circulation looking for these invaders. So that way, anytime you encounter it again, you will not get sick. So in here you can see the immune response, B cells versus T cells. So with the B cells, we have our antigen presenting B cell, which presents to the helper T cell. The helper T cell then activates the B cell. It selects, we call this clonal selection. It selects the one B cell that has the specific key for this particular antigen, which we'll call the lock. We then have one go and is stored into a memory B cell. This stays in your body for continued surveillance forever. Another one is differentiated into a plasma cell, and the whole job of this plasma cell is to make it rain antibodies. Absolutely. It just floods your bloodstream with antibodies so that anytime that invader is encountered or cells that have that invader encountered, these antibodies bind to it and act as a flag and say, over here, come kill me. I am invaded with something that's not me. T cells work a little bit differently. Here we see the threat detection and alert right here. The antigen, which is the virus, is absorbed by a macrophage. It's presented to the helper T cell. The helper T cell then, not only does it activate the B cells, but it activates the cytotoxic T cell. The cytotoxic T cell will then differentiate into the effector and the memory. The memory T cell goes directly down here and continues surveillance. The effector T cell comes over here and binds to the target cell, releases its perforin, and kills off the cell. So 2 different ways in our adaptive immune response with both our B and our T cells. Now, this brings us to how we become immune to a disease. 2 different ways. We have active and passive immunity. Active immunity means that this occurs in your body naturally. There's 2 different types of immunity as well. We have natural and passive. Naturally acquired is when you naturally acquire a disease, like the cold that is currently ravaging my nose. And your body produces immunity to that. Artificially acquired immunity is that you either absorb or that is injected into, which we'll get into. So active immunity produces long-term immunity to this particular disease. So the virus that I currently have, hopefully it's only a virus, the virus that I currently have, I will never get again because my body will make antibodies and plasma B cells and memory B cells and cytotoxic T cells and effector T cells, all of these, and these will hang out in my body forever. I'll never get this cold again. Will I get another cold? Yeah, probably next week. It's pretty awesome. Active immunity is long-lived. This is your body producing these cells and storing this memory, this immunity, this for the rest of your life. Passive immunity is when things are either injected or absorbed in. The two ways that we have passive immunity is antibodies can be directly injected into someone. In the example of an immune-compromised person, such as cancer, this can happen as well. Or babies getting their mother's milk or through the placenta, getting antibodies through the mother's milk or through the placenta. Now, the antibody response, as we talked about, is what allows us to recognize specific invaders. So let's think about this. This graph right here shows you your immune response. It's increasing here on the y-axis, and time is here on the x-axis. So the first time we're exposed to the antigen, our immune system, so we have to find that plasma B cell that's specific for this invader. We have to increase the amount of, we have to differentiate, we have to make antibodies, we have to make a memory B cell, we have to make a helper T cell, or we don't have to make helper T cells, we have to make effectors, we have to make a cytotoxic T cell, and then we store the immunity. So basically, over the course, it takes you about 2 weeks to clear that disease. Now, if this disease is something terrible like tetanus, for which there is no necessarily cure, or botulism, which is a progressive disease, or diphtheria, or whooping cough, then there are chances, especially if you are a tiny baby, that you will die within this 14 days. However, if your immune system kicks in and you get over here, then you are immune to it forever. And then upon second exposure, please note that there is less than 1 day, it's usually between 24 to 36 hours, that your body recognizes that disease, mounts a massive immune response, and you never, ever, ever even realize you were exposed to that bacteria, that virus, that disease. It's amazing. And this, my friends, is why we vaccinate. Vaccinations or immunizations are a type of acquired immunity, artificially acquired, as you can see here, right here. And in these vaccines, it is either a heat-killed bacterium. So if it's a heat-killed, that means it's not coming back to life. It is not Jesus. It's not coming back to life. It's not Lazarus. Nope, not at all. Or it is a part of that bacterium, part of that virus that your body can recognize and build antibodies for. Make a memory B cell, make a cytotoxic T cell for, and store them in your lymph nodes. And the reason why we have vaccinations is so that we don't ever encounter things like polio, smallpox, measles, mumps, rubella. Rubella might not be, rubella is German measles, it might not be a big deal. However, if you're pregnant and you get rubella, and you're not aware of it, which can happen, it can ravage your fetus, ruin the neurological system, ruin the skin. It's terrible, cause massive neurological defects in your growing baby, which is why we check pregnant mothers for their titers. A titer is the level of antibody that you have in your blood for those. So this is why we vaccinate. So that way we can get we can trick your body into producing antibodies as well as memory B cells and memory T cells to this. So that way, if you ever encounter it, you're not going to get that disease. It's amazing what science can do. We have another video. I will post this again for you as well. And that is it for our immunity. Thanks for joining me. We'll talk about respiration.